All right, guys, welcome in. It is time for full court press. Rob, I think the word is penultimate show of 2025. Two shows left in the year. Of course, New Year's Eve tomorrow, the 30th today. Another good day of college basketball. Not quite as many games as yesterday, but still a couple of day games. More importantly, Rob, the bigger conferences are getting involved today. Yesterday, we had conference play sort of get going for a lot of the smaller leagues. But today, there's some big conference games. The ACC has a couple. The Big East, which feels like a mid-major league this year, has a couple. And there's other conferences in the mix as well. I love that we're getting to conference play, and we'll talk more about that as the show goes on. But let's start with, I don't know if this is necessarily a feature game, but it's national TV. It's the biggest name, and a little bit over a week ago, we had Jim Root fill in on the show for me when I was at Drexel. That was a couple weeks ago. And you guys talked about North Carolina, and specifically you said, well, we're really going to have to revisit this game. I think the conversation, Rob, was like just the potential clash of styles here and the speed in which these two teams might want to play. So kick us off. Florida State, North Carolina. Did you find a way in with the total or the spread here?
Well, let's start with the matchup here, Adam, which is a contrast in styles, right? FSU obviously wants to go quick. Number 8 in the country in adjusted tempo. Digging even further, you find that their possessions are the 5th quickest in NCAA basketball Division I this year, 5th fastest possession length. The contrast falls into play there because North Carolina's defense is 353rd in length of possession time allowed. So they make you work to get off a shot. FSU doesn't want to do that. There's a couple other things here. FSU tries to make a living inside the arc. And we talked that day, and we have since then, about the length of North Carolina across that front line. When you have 3 6'10s or better, it's just become a different team. And North Carolina defends the 2 almost as well as anybody in the nation. They rank 2nd in 2-point field goal percentage allowed. Also good on the perimeter, 13th. It's going to be difficult for Florida State to find open shots unless they get open floor in this game, which would mean North Carolina has to run with them. I do find it interesting, though, Adam, that you can find a really nice comp game on FSU's schedule when you look at their game against Florida. On the road, Florida full of bigs across the front line. It's their strength. And FSU played them to 2 points, 78-76. Now, since then, they've been blown out on the road by Houston, which is also a great rebounding team and great 2-point defense. Get beat by 15 there. But the point spread here is right in that range, 15 points, North Carolina. I'm not so sure that number isn't a bit too high. I'm not so sure that this total hasn't been bet up too high. It's gone from 157 all the way to 163.5. I think what you would have to assume if you're going to get to 163.5 or 164, which cashes an over ticket, you'd have to assume that North Carolina is going to get involved for a better part of the 40 minutes in a track meet with FSU. And you'd have to believe that FSU is going to score their share of points. Again, I'll just go back to the Florida game where Florida's, it plays with more pace than UNC. And that game only got to 154. I'm not sure what the love affair is with the over in this game. I would probably look towards an under. I think it's to a point now where you can push back and play under. The point spread in this game seems to be fairly solid, but I still think that's a little bit too high as well. The outcome here could be, which wouldn't be a surprise, Adam, is that FSU finds it difficult to find shots. FSU doesn't make shots. They're not a great shooting team to begin with, and North Carolina just pulls away and wins by significant margin. But I think the probability of this staying more toward the under, you can get a 160-point game here and still be under the number. That's a lot of points. And I think that, FSU opening conference game, In that venue, it's difficult for sure. But again, I can't shake the thought that FSU went to the O'Connell Center and played Florida to 2 points. So I would have to probably lean under as my my more favorite lean here. And again, we always preface this stuff by whether we bet the game or not. I have not bet it. So I haven't pushed my money to the table. So I'm not recommending anybody does theirs. But if you're asking for an analysis, I think under is probably the way I would look first.
Yeah, I haven't bet this one yet either. I think my numbers suggest that the number is a little low. I've got this up at 17 and a half. So that was a little surprising to me, like that the math, just the math for me played out, sort of suggesting that North Carolina had a little bit of line value at 14 and a half. It's still 14 and a half most places. I see a couple of books have gone to 15 at this point. I think that's the way it happens, Rob. If it does, is North Carolina kind of pulling away. It's hard to believe that they just completely bury FSU start to finish here. Seems like a thing where it's like, if they start to exert their will, if you will, and the tempo goes the way that they want to go, and all of a sudden they're able to string stops together, that it could get into that 15, 16, knockout punch type range. Certainly North Carolina at home has the ability to do that. But I found myself looking at Florida State and the fact that they've only played 2 road games so far this year. And that's something you're going to kind of see a lot over the next couple of days, where it's like when you get into power conference play, you're going to see quite a few teams playing their first true road game. Maybe they've played 1 road game because of course now the way that the non-conference is built for a lot of these teams is teams like Florida State, like North Carolina have replaced a lot of their road non-con games with going to play these MTE neutral court type games. So I think it's a little overrated to think, oh, well, this team hasn't gone on the road yet this year, because typically they've gone somewhere, right? Typically they've played someone. And so that to me is like not as big of a deal. That being said, I do think North Carolina being at home here, Rob, feeding off the crowd, I think it's more likely if you go back to your conversation with Jim, like which team sort of dictates how this game goes. I think it's probably North Carolina. And if they do that, I wouldn't be surprised if they win it by double digits. With that being said, 15 is, I feel like that's kind of a good number. I don't know if I want to lay 14 and a half, but I wouldn't take the points here either. So it would be North Carolina or pass for me. But tough game. Well, these are 2 teams, Rob. I feel like me personally, I just need to see more of. You get to this point in the year, there's 365 teams in Division I college basketball. Some of them I feel like I have a great beat on, and some of them I feel like I just can't really assess at all. These 2 teams are the latter for me, for sure. So a very, I guess, an unconfident, I don't know if that's a word, but if it's not, I'm going to call it a non-confident lean toward North Carolina for me.
Yeah, what's interesting here, Adam, is the Houston game, obviously not favorable attendance-wise towards the Seminoles, played in the Toyota Center, certainly not Houston campus game, but a Houston, what we'll call semi-home game. In the games against Florida and Houston, Florida State shot miserably. Hey, I'm just looking at the numbers here. The Florida game, they shoot 34% from 2. They shoot 26% from 3. And in the Houston game, the numbers were no better, under 40% for the game and 31 from 3. They didn't even shoot well, and they came within 2 and 15. But to counter that, you have that game against Dayton where they got simply destroyed. And you have a game against Georgia, which I think, Georgia just does what Florida State does better, and they wound up running them out of the building. Luke Locks, I don't think we've mentioned him at all this year. For years it was a Leonard Hamilton team, but Luke Locks comes in with this, they like to get to the rim, but they do shoot a lot of threes. And it's what they're probably going to need here, Adam. If the threes go and they're in open court and they're quick shots, then they hang around. But to the point I was trying to make earlier, they didn't shoot them well against Florida or Houston, and they still hung around. And I would say that North Carolina, no matter how large, and I don't think it's significant, but it is a step down in class. And obviously, Florida and Houston are better teams than North Carolina is. So we'll see how this goes. I think you could debate it two ways, which makes it difficult to bet. And the number doesn't leave us a lot of leeway. I still think I would look a little bit toward the under.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading some of the chat comments here. We'll move on to another game in a second. But like Bayou says, it could hit 170. No defense will be played. I would say I kind of would punch back at this move at this point for two reasons. One, North Carolina, if they have their way, they're going to slow this game down. So it's going to be more of a possession type thing. Two, I'll go to I think it was Trevor in the chat, tough road spot, and then it's like, if the shots aren't falling from Florida State, that's how you get your under and your North Carolina covered. If they're not hitting shots, like they could be down 10 pretty quickly. And then you talk about first year coach, tough road environment, 0-2 on the road so far this year. And didn't they the road games, Rob, correct me if I'm right, the road games were Florida and Houston. So obviously two tough teams on the road, but they got throttled by Dayton somewhere. I just forget where that game was.
Yeah, the
that was a
Dayton
road
game was True Road. The Houston game was in the Toyota Center.
That's right. Okay. So that was the one that I was thinking of, going up to Dayton, just get absolutely run out by like 30. Right. More we talk about it, the more I think that's on the table for UNC here. Because it's not like Dayton was playing great ball ahead of that game either. And I just think North Carolina might just be like that much better, where if they get the game they want, which I think they might at home, 9-0 at home this year for the Tar Heels, probably a blowout. Okay, let's go to, so this one, couple people, let's do this first. I wore the zip up. I told my buddy Joey Cheese, he likes Princeton today. I said, I'll throw the Princeton quarter zip on for you in a show of support. But it also is the day game. I knew people were going to want to talk about this one. And these are teams. So you talk about just, it's going to be different for everyone. That to me is why college basketball is so great. It's like you can watch like a substantial amount of college basketball and be tuned into something almost entirely different than the next person. Because there's just so many teams. There's so many games. It's like, it's so different from other sports. If you're watching Major League Baseball and you're like digging in and tuning it, like we're going to probably know a lot of the same stuff, right? Because it's just like there's 30 teams. There's only so much to know or to see. Whereas like college basketball, Vermont, Princeton are two teams I've watched a ton of this year. And so a couple thoughts here. So this is an early tips at the Jadwin Gym. Rob, have you been to Jadwin Gym? That was a really cool building. That's out in Princeton, New Jersey.
Yeah, it's close by, but I haven't been there.
Anyway, Princeton's going to have a home game here. Vermont is taking a ton of money. Princeton has had their best player out for a while, although I don't know if he's really their best player. He's on paper, he's their best player. That'd be Dalen Davis. But to me, like, how much does that really factor into the number at this point? I mean, he's been out for some time, has not played since the Northeastern game on November 20th. Malik Abdullahi, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, returned against Merrimack, and then he played his full minutes against Temple, 31 minutes, went for 21 points and 7 rebounds. So, like, that was a great boost for Princeton. I guess I'm not quite sure why Vermont is taking all this money. That's my first thought with this game is, why is Vermont suddenly a 3.5 point road favorite when they opened -1, which is where I have this power rating? Vermont -1. I actually had it pick, and then at this point, I'm giving the opposing team 1 point for Davis still being out. So I guess for me here, Rob, I disagree with the money, and I could only punch back with the home Princeton Tigers here. But Vermont's pretty good. They worked out Siena. We had no chance in that game. They had a counter for everything Siena wanted to do. Gus Yalden has been a revelation for the Catamounts. As a guy that came over from Seton Hall. barely played, never played at Wisconsin. Since stepping foot on the floor for Vermont, I mean, he plays 20 minutes a game. He's averaging like 20 points. As efficient of a guy offensively as you're going to find at this level. In spite of that, I still think I lean the Tigers. Can you talk me off of Princeton here, Rob?
It'd be hard. Not that I couldn't make a case for Vermont. Obviously, Princeton, they've lost, I don't know, what is it, 8, 9 in a row? Just hasn't been good for them. Of course, Davis, one of the contributing factors. I think when I looked it up this morning, he had missed 6 games straight and had been the leading scorer up until that point. But they just don't, both teams want to play slow. First off, in my mind, it leads you directly toward, well, let's maybe try a shot at the under here. I look at, there are some common opponent games, right, with some recency to them. One side beats Merrimack by 7. The other side loses to Merrimack by 3. Vermont, the winner, Princeton, the loser. Princeton, even with some additions or in addition to the roster, fell short against Temple, which is not a really good defensive team. I kind of look at it like Vermont, to me, Adam, they're both so mirror image, right? They're both always good defensively. They're both always slow paced. Vermont, to me, is the better rebounding team. If you can get some second chance points and you can get yourself to the free throw line, that's helpful. The road environment is not helpful. But again, I'll use the phrase I use for a lot of teams over the course of time, prior shows, and it will come in the future too, as being venue proof. I don't think Vermont walks anywhere and is intimidated by any venue. That's been such a good low major, probably should classify them as a mid-major for so long now, that you don't walk into the gym and you're overwhelmed by Princeton. I don't know that Princeton can score enough here. I don't know that they'll allow enough. I totally agree with the fact that the games come from 140 down to 138.5. At 138.5 in this price range, you're asking for 71-67 Vermont to be a cover and under. 71-67 sounds a lot in a game like this to me. Or sounds like a lot. So I would probably look under. And I would suggest just that, maybe in the beginning, people weren't aware of the Dalen Davis injury, but when it occurs 5, 6, 7 games, now more people become aware. And I always think these lines move based off of injuries. So that's the only explanation I have for 1 to 3.5, but I would look under the total here, under 138.5. Up, you're muted.
Sorry about that. That's a great point, Rob. Like when you get 8 games removed from a guy being out, like there's just not much that it's going to do to the number at that point. And I think that's where we're probably at with Princeton right now. I think the number is what it is. Like I couldn't possibly bump this number more than like a point for him being out. Like certainly he matters to the team, but at this point the books have had 8 games to price Princeton appropriately. Now, I kind of see where the Vermont money would come from. They've been far more impressive than Princeton so far this year. The thing that I would say, the only thing that's caused me to not click this yet, right, and put this in at Princeton plus 3.5 is I question Princeton having any sort of toughness, that they're kind of soft. They've always been that way, right? Like that. I don't think there's been, the Princeton team that went to the Sweet 16 a couple of years ago was probably an exception, but the last couple of years, they don't have much of an interior, like toughness type presence. And of course, the name is escaping me, but I think it was Pierce, the guy that decided to sit out this year and he's going to transfer, was kind of like the post scorer on this team. Now it's just like, they're going to get their back cut and get a layup every once in a while. But this is a team that's only averaging 68 points per game, 335th nationally. They don't really get good looks. Like that's the other thing. This is like Princeton last year when they still had Xavier Lee and had a couple 3-point shooters, which remember last year's Princeton team was very disappointing in terms of like where they were projected to land. If you go back to the beginning of last year, Princeton was like the odds-on favorite to win the Ivy. They didn't come close to that, but they still could hit the 3. This year's Princeton team, 32.4% from 3-point range. That's awful. for a team that really relies on the three to score.
Right.
254th nationally. It is why they are 337th nationally in field goal percentage. And the thing I noticed watching Vermont play Siena, Vermont's gonna have the better game plan here. That's the thing. They will have the better game plan. And if they force Princeton into just taking tough shots, which Princeton will do, and Princeton allows Vermont to run their offense, that's the problem. That's why I don't think I can actually bet Princeton here. It's just Vermont's shown the ability to execute with Yalden out there. And if they do that, then you're going to be sitting here like, oh, well, that's clearly why this got bet from 1 to 3.5. So I'm my numbers say Princeton, but I've seen enough of these two teams to not be sure about wanting to actually get to the window with that.
Real quick, Adam, yeah. I've got to just say one thing here about rebounding. You look at these two teams, and they're both in the 300s in offensive rebounding, yet they're both top 25 in defensive rebounding. And the reason for that, and it's been this way for Princeton ever since Pete Carrill was the head coach, is these two teams, they don't send people to the glass. John Becker, the same thing. They're always a bad offensive rebounding team because they're more worried about transition defense than they are about getting second shots. So to your point about Princeton having to take tough looks and not getting second chances, then it's going to be difficult to get to this total on both sides because the same goes for Princeton. Vermont's not going to get second chances. And to your point again about thinking that Vermont will execute their offense better, that's probably what it comes down to sidewise. This 138.5 is really, to me, looking higher and higher by the second.
Someone says, why is Adam always looking left? I've got screens up to do this show when you guys are just like, hey, Vermont, Princeton, hey, talk about Southeast Louisiana. I've got 3 screens going. My big one is right here. The camera is right here. And then I have another small one. So that's why I'm usually looking left. The other thing that someone in the chat makes a good point. Yeah, like Princeton does not run like the Princeton offense anymore. I mean, it's not Air Force. It's not Joe Scott. But like still like most of their layups come from like slipping to the hoop, right? Or like last year, it was like Xavier Lee kind of just crafting his way in, which he could do at that. I mean, he was really good at doing that. Now they just don't get a lot of that. And that's what brings me to, why I'm probably not going to bet this game. They just don't get the quality of shot that you would want to back a team like in this price range, right? Against a Vermont team that, unless they just come in sleepwalking at a 1 p.m. tip, is the better team. That's why this is difficult. That being said, Rob, I think your under handicap actually probably makes the most sense if you want to bet this game. All right, let's go with. Let me see if I can figure out how to do this. They're in here somewhere. We have a. Oh, here we go. Let me pull this up for a second. So, look at that. We've got a graphic. It is $5 Tuesday. And for a second, you don't have to look left at my odds screen. You can just look at this nice graphic that producer Dan has built for us. But Rob, $5 Tuesday today. Everyone will have a play on the site. All non-5% plays are $5. And the reason that I clarify that is I've got my first 5% college basketball play of the year. Today, I kind of had premeditated, decided that I was going to do that this year. Or, obviously it's been I just messed up our screen badly. But obviously, like, there's been no secret. I did not have the strongest start to the college basketball season, but I took something from something you were way ahead of the curve on. So I got to give you credit here, Rob. I remember doing the panel show with you and Joe Ranieri is the host, me, you. We would have 3 different panelists. We'd rotate. And as soon as the transfer portal started, you really started to pump the brakes in November, December in terms of like the number of units you were actually risking on games because of this whole, it's such a free for all. And someone on Twitter was giving me a hard time the other day, which is, normal for this business. But he was like, you think you're just going to have a better conference season when you didn't have a good non-conference, when there's edges to be had in the non-conference play. And so my response, Rob, was I've been beating numbers left and right. My CLV, my market assessment has been great, but the randomness of the outcomes in November and December are so high. And I think that's what you were getting at years ago when you're like, hey, these rosters are really different than they, we need some like in-season data. And college basketball has become that on steroids at this point, has it not?
It definitely has, Adam. And I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago where I decided basically that I was just going to sporadically play through November and December and then try to play full force college basketball from January on. This year, I took a little bit of a different approach. I've played more volume, but I've just lowered the unit size to the point where I don't even know. I'm trying to think. Maybe I've had 2-3% plays. For those who don't know what we're talking about with the percent at WagerTalk.com, when we release plays, they're on a scale from 1 to 5% of your bankroll. 5%, which Adam has one going today, being the strongest recommendation we can make on a game. Mine have all been 99% have been 2% or less. Even if I feel confident it's 2% or less, until, as you mentioned, until we get into this spot where we now know where the cohesiveness lies, what the coaching change has actually meant to the team, what installing a brand new front court, 3 guys across, means to the team, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been, record-wise, it's been successful. I actually wish I had been playing 4% plays because I'd be up way more units at this point in time. But you have to kind of assess the playing field. There's 356 teams, which I think, again, is back to something you were saying about 30 Major League Baseball teams, 360-something. I think I said 356. I think it's 360-plus bettable college basketball teams. It's kind of crazy to think that you could have a firm grasp on all of them come November 10th or 11th, whenever the season started. So that's just been the way I've chosen to approach college basketball handicapping.
Yeah. So to me, this was all premeditated. We had 4 days to sort of reassess over the Christmas break. The vast majority of my plays November, December were 3% with some 4s sprinkled in. I kind of had in my head, like, okay, so I went 2-0 last night. I had Dartmouth, Illinois State, both easy wins. And in my head, I said, once you have a 2-0 day, it's time to press the gas a little bit. So I've got a spot I love tonight. And I made it a 5% play. And the other thing, which I don't think it's up yet, but we're trying to get up today, going forward, we are going to get we're going to scrap the weekend special, and we are going to get a standing package that's myself and Rob. That's just 3-day all access at like a very discounted price. I hope to have that up by this afternoon. Reason I bring that up is, we have to sell the 5% plays full price, even on $5 Tuesday. But that 3-day package will offer a decent discount since, from a cost standpoint, you're almost halfway there if there's a 5% play. So I hope to have that up at some point this afternoon. The play is up right now on my page. And if you're an all access client, which I think is the best way to go, and we still have great specials for that, it is up as well. So thanks for letting me chat about that for a second. I wanted to point that out, and I promise we won't promo you to death again till the end of the show, where I will do it again. So I'm just giving you guys a heads up. Get ready for another promo before the end of the show. Jersey in the chat. Yeah, Rio Grande did not show for me last night, and that's too bad because Rob Vino had another great call on Oklahoma State. It is to the point where, like, you should either be buying Rob's plays or checking with Rob, watching this show any day the Oklahoma State Cowboys play, because he's absolutely nailed that team. And another triple-digit, 100-point, no sweat team total winner in that game last night for Rob. Did you sprinkle that with your client plays? Did you end up adding Oklahoma State to your card?
Yeah, it actually was a client play prior to giving it out on the show, but we've done that so often. Just another thing for folks that are watching. If you've been watching the first month and a half of this show, you've gotten a lot of client plays released on this show. I don't know that will continue through January through March. Some cases, yes, some cases maybe not. But yeah, that was a client play last night. And again, it was two-sided. It was a fade of Bethune-Cookman. It was a pro Oklahoma State offense play, and it did work out for us from wire to wire.
All right, the A-Kid A13. Let's get back to hoops. He says now to Creighton Butler. I think that's fair. I I referenced my conversation with my pal Joey Cheese this morning. He's really a big East guy, and the bulk of our conversation was just talking about just how awful this conference is outside of UConn this year. Rob, maybe historically bad is the Big East this year, outside of like UConn being a legitimate national title contender. So the interesting thing about that is we get into Big East play, and now you've got a lot of these bad teams are going to play each other, right? So someone's probably going to emerge from the ashes as like maybe like a fraudulent good team. And no two teams are more at the front of that list than these two, Rob. Creighton, who looked just abysmal through much of non-conference play, comes out and then just rolls in their first two Big East games. And then Butler, who just to me, I don't know what it is about Butler because they've played decent at times, but they feel like a fraud 10-3. They're catching 5.5 on the road here. It's never easy to go out to Omaha, but are you buying what you saw to Creighton the first couple Big East games for the Blue Jays?
It's interesting, Adam, and I apologize to anybody who might hear the dog going crazy. There could be UPS or somebody in the driveway. Creighton, you have to make a decision here. Prior to their last 3 games, I think we had one of their games on the show one day, and I don't think there was a positive thought on Creighton at that time. And as you mentioned, it's turned around so wildly over the last 3 games. It's almost as if maybe something was being held back, maybe some sort of rotational minutes. And when we rotate players in and out and who we put together on the floor at the same time has been figured out. But, I think it was the Xavier game. As a matter of fact, I think Xavier took money. We were praising how good Richard Pitino has brought Xavier along, and then they lose by 41. And Creighton in that game just absolutely destroyed them offensively. They go to Marquette. They destroy Marquette with 84 points. Utah Tech, 92 more. At this point, are we sold on the fact that maybe Creighton offensively has found their stride? I know earlier we talked about the losses at point guard and center were so tough to overcome. They've lost a lot of talent, but the 2 Iowa kids taking their places, I know I was waiting for them to stand up and be accounted for, and they kind of have lately. So Creighton, it's what you believe at this point in time. Do you believe they just beat lousy teams and scored points? Or do you believe that they're actually getting better offensively? I'm not sure that I'm on either side of that fence at this point in time. This game might help decide a little bit. Butler, obviously a really good offensive team, suffered a little bit lately because UConn plays really good defense and because Northwestern plays super slow. Butler doesn't really like that. This game is more in their style concept. And I think we could see a lot of points here, Adam. I don't see anything out of either defense other than the fact that it's a conference game and sometimes defense takes hold. But so far, not so in conference for Creighton. When they've had a defensive weakling, they've pummeled them. So I think points are the way this game is going to go. You take a look at this total as I try to get the current. I'm looking at 156. And the market has pounded it pretty hard, 151.5 to 156. Congratulations to those who got the early number. The CLV doesn't always pay off, as Adam has mentioned, but it's what you're aiming to get. I still think at 156.5, it's got wheel room. I think both of these teams could find their way to the 80s in this game. Neither one plays blazing fast, but you're going to get up tempo in this game, Adam. So for me, I don't want to trust either side. As far as just putting my eggs in the Butler basket or the Creighton basket, I'd rather put the eggs in both baskets and say, let's just go get some buckets, get ourselves to 157. I think that's probably the best way for me to go. And as I talk, Adam, line movements in the morning are crazy. I just see one random locale go to 154.5 while everybody else still sits at 156, 156.5. So if you like the over, maybe you want to go to that place, look through all your apps and find the one that's hanging a 154.5 and go ahead and bet over. I got you muted again.
That's because my dogs bark too. So I've been trying to get good at that. Although I don't think my mic really picks it up, but that's okay. They're I can assure you they're up there barking at something. A dog that walks by, a delivery truck, air. They bark at everything. So I try to keep it muted when I can. Randall Sheffield, thank you for the donation, and he's got a question. I'm gonna segue this a little bit, and I'm not gonna pick this one. So we will give you two other games. So I'll give Rob a chance to collect his thoughts as I finish sort of touching on Butler Creighton. He said, so Randall says the two best over-under picks today. I think when he says the GOAT, he's got to be referring to Rob for sure. He is certainly the totals GOAT right there, and we'll go to him for that. Although I am going to propose one, we'll each do it. But as far as this game is concerned, like my biggest problem with Creighton is they still play like they have Ryan Kalkbrenner, but he's not there, right? Like elite rim protector. They still play almost the same style, except he's no longer with the team. So it's like they don't defend the rim as well as they did with him. But the only thing that's concerning to Butler, to me, is that they do kind of need to get to the foul line, I think, to like really have their full offensive success. And Creighton, and they've been doing this for years, they straight up just aren't going to foul you. They're just not going to foul. They probably defend without fouling as good as any team in the country. That being said, I can't really disagree with there being points in this game. I think there's probably, Creighton's become pretty jump shot reliant, Rob, but where Creighton's going to hit their jumpers? They're going to hit their jumpers in Omaha, in that building. They've always got a nice crowd behind them. They shoot the ball better at home. So, Rob, very slight lean toward the over here. I had one total jotted down. So I'll give you do you want me to go to you first? And do you have something for Randall on a total, maybe even your parlay leg, or do you want me to throw my game out first? Up to you.
Throw your game out first, and I'll find the parlay leg.
Love that. Okay, let's head out west, because this is a game that I really like. I was very intrigued by this game. Ultimately, did not get to the window with it. Think there could be a boatload of points. That's going to be Washington State and Seattle. So now when Seattle plays basketball, you always got to check their, they've adopted the UConn Villanova method, where half of their games are on campus in very tiny Red Hawk gym, and the other half of their games are in basically an NBA arena if Seattle ever lures an NBA team back to Seattle. Climate Pledge Arena, where I think it's the Kraken. I'm not a hockey guy. I believe that's where they play. And that is essentially where half of Seattle's home games are now. So this game's at Climate Pledge. Rob, I think to me that's probably a little bit of a less of a home court advantage. Like I would, if I'm Seattle, I'd much rather throw Washington State into tiny little Red Hawk gym, like maybe 1,500 seat gym, instead of an NBA arena where they're probably much more comfortable. But I think being at Climate Pledge, some of the games we've seen there so far, I think, by all accounts, feels like some nice, shooting sightline. Seattle shot the ball great against Washington when they recently played them there. Seattle, to me, is an undervalued team as it is. I was kind of hoping Washington State would get the respect that they seemed to get over the weekend after they won. I kind of think Seattle is a solid look on the side here, but the number is probably right at 5.5. And I go to Washington, and the reason I like the over, Rob, in this one is I think Washington played a tough non-conference schedule, played some decent defensive teams. And I think you might see their offensive numbers start to tick up as we come into conference play in the WCC, which is probably overall easier than what they play in the non-con. And then you go to the Portland game over the weekend. I took a really tough beat there with Portland plus 4.5. But it took them 30 minutes. Those last 10 minutes, they really kind of got going offensively. And I just wonder if there's some carryover there. NBA arena, they play a good offensive game, and Seattle will oblige, and they'll score. And that you could get to 150 pretty easy here, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was going to be my first question to you, Adam, is do you think that the number has flown too far at this point? Obviously, 140 to 147. 146.5. Let's use that. It looks like there's a few more 46.5. Is it too much? I will say also real quick that too, if I was going to defend the over, I would totally think that this is a bounce back game for Seattle's offense. Now, I took the beat with Seattle on Sunday night. I had them against San Francisco.
I like that.
They took a little money. Yeah. and they were never in that thing offensively. I don't think they scored 60 points, if I'm remembering right. San Francisco beat them pretty soundly, held their offense down, and you would think that that offense breaks. At least I'm the kind of guy that plays a lot of bounce back stuff, so I would think that
Yep.
Seattle on this floor bounces back tonight, scores better, which in turn has Washington State score better, et cetera, et cetera. Washington State has been able to hold some games under this number. They haven't played one over this number since the Arizona State game, or excuse me, they played Mercer over. And prior to that, nothing before Arizona State. But saying that, I just feel like maybe the Seattle team total even intrigues
That's
me
it.
quite a bit. And to your point about playing this in Climate Pledge, do they expect 12,000 to show up to this game? Is that why they move it out of Red Hawk Arena? I mean, I know it's in state and maybe they're expecting larger attendance than the home arena can fill or can take to fire code, but still, I'm not so sure they're going to get a ton of people at this game.
Yeah, listen, playing the Gonzaga game there makes a lot of sense. Playing the Washington game there makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of with you. I don't know that like Washington State, are they like coming in droves from Pullman for this game? I don't know. I will say this though, I think I want to revise my opinion here. I think Seattle team total over probably makes the most sense. You got a team that's going to be able to score at the rim. They've done it with relative ease so far this season. 48% from the field. Their bigs are really impressive for a team in the WCC that's not Gonzaga or St. Mary's. Their front court has played incredibly well. They outplayed a very good Washington front court the other day in that game. Hans Steinbach was back, and he got outplayed by Seattle's front court tandem, which was to me like just extremely impressive. I was on Seattle in that game as a dog, and they that wasn't a fluke. They went in and beat Washington and also beat them pretty much at their own game. It was really impressive in my opinion. Seattle can shoot. Both these teams are going to shoot it a little bit. I'm with you, Rob. I think the best angle in this game is finding a way for Seattle to bounce back from that performance over the weekend. So I'm either going to lay 5. You can still get 5 at some places, or I'm going to take the Seattle team total over. And if you want the total, Randall, I think I would go Seattle team total over in this game. All right, Rob Bino, do you know where you're going with the parlay? And is it another total for Randall here?
Yeah, I had a couple of things I looked at, Adam, and I'm going to, sometimes I do this. I just give you my 2 or 3 thoughts and then give you what I'll use for this show. One of my initial thoughts here was not a total. Just for those listening, and maybe we'll get to this game, I'm not sure. But until further notice, I think there's just a fade on Marquette where I'm concerned, no matter where they're playing, who they're playing. Seton Hall.
Rob, let's talk about this game. Yeah,
okay.
Let's talk about Marquette, Seton Hall, and then we'll get to the other total, because this deserves a discussion, in my opinion.
I'll start it off then. And for me, I think I said everything I thought about Seton Hall the other day when we had their game. And I don't think it's anything different than what we've said all season long, right? Sheen Holloway, it basically told everybody that would listen prior to the season that this group was different, that this group, I think you used the term buying in. If you buy into his system, you're a really good team. And this group, he had a good feel about them, and they proved it time and time again. If there's one thing I know about this team so far compared to Marquette, is that I'm going to get 40 minutes of basketball out of Seton Hall, whether they play the game in my backyard or whether they play the game in their home gym. And Marquette's just not that way, Adam. You watch Marquette and I never want to say a team gives up, but they find these ways to just get behind and not really have any comeback in them, if you know what I mean. I think you described Princeton as a little bit soft, but this is not the same type of soft. This is like here we go again. We're behind. We can't come back. It's not a typical Shaka Smart team that's going to force you into pressure turnovers where they're going to capitalize with cheap buckets. Seton Hall is that team that's going to force Marquette into turnovers and cheap buckets on the other end. I can't. They could prove me wrong tonight, Marquette. Obviously, we just talked about the turnaround Creighton has made inside of conference, but I don't know that they do it against this team. From what you said earlier about the Big East being a down league this year, it would not surprise me at all, and shouldn't surprise anybody if Seton Hall finds themselves in the top 4 in the standings, conference-wise, at the end of the season, because they're just one of those teams right now. They have enough leadership on the floor. They have enough shot makers on the floor. They have enough defensive tenacity to win this game by a bucket, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm at the point, Rob, where Marquette has reached Loyola Chicago territory, where I almost, like, my number is almost always going to show value on Marquette at this point. But there's like 5 teams, I can probably count them on one hand, where I straight up just, I've totally had to abandon my preseason assessment of the team. And it's got me a little bit confused at this point in the season, because as we know, Rob, we've talked about this a million times. Like, there's non-conference play, and then when conference play starts, especially for a team in the Big East, it really is a clean slate. It's a reset, right? Like, a team like Marquette, all is going to be forgiven if they go out and play well in Big East play. That's just how it works now. So, but the thing is, like, I've seen nothing from Marquette that suggests that they should be close to a pick in this game. Like, yeah, they're playing at home. Have you seen Marquette games lately? There's been no one there. There's been no one in the building. Well, I'm not giving them home court edge. That arena, they play in an NBA arena. It's been some games half full, huge sections open. So right now, like, Seton Hall, like, I'm almost in this thing where it's like I wasn't ahead of the curve on Seton Hall, so now I've got to be stubborn, and it's like I can't jump on late, right? Because, like, I still think there could be some regression in Seton Hall's future. But, like, here, I think the only thing I could do is just play Seton Hall and continue to hope that they can, defend their tails off and play well. It's a really interesting matchup, and it was very interesting to me that the spread was so low. Like, I actually think if I'm just going off of my, like, what I've watched and what I've seen from both these teams, I almost feel like Seton Hall should be a little bit bigger of a favorite, similar to what they were favored against Providence, right? I think they got up to 2.5, maybe even 3 at one point. But I don't know. I can't do it. It's an interesting game. Not going to get my money. But Colin says he locked in Seton Hall money line. Listen, I'm not going to argue with you guys there. Can't argue with it. Wouldn't push back on that. Rob, I will say this. I probably should have clarified this, or I think I meant to say it and I didn't. I am going to play Seattle on the spread as my pick for the parlay. I probably should have said that when we were breaking down the Seattle game. I will play the spread. I'll wait to see what it is at the end of the show. I may put 5 minus 120 in the parlay. I haven't decided yet. But I want to go back to Randall. He donated, and he asked for 2. And since he threw the donation there, we're going to give him 2. So he wants your best over-under pick. And if that happens to be your parlay leg, go ahead and lock it in now. You have the floor.
All right. So here's what I will give you, Randall. And again, we appreciate the donation. I will give you my parlay leg for the show. It will be a total. Over at WagerTalk, my top total play, is going to be for sale during $5 Tuesday. So the company doesn't appreciate us giving those away. So I won't do that here, but I will give you one that I'm going to play anyway as a client play, one that I bet. And it happens to be an early start. And I played Wyoming Air Force under 145. Bunch of reasons here, but mostly, Adam, it's just a fade of the Air Force offense, right? When you look at Air Force offense, what do? They play extremely slow, average possession length in the bottom 10 in the nation, and they turn the ball over. They don't get a lot of possessions because they turn the ball over. And again, I think we're going to reiterate this a lot this year, but I think it's worth saying that when we talk about turnover percentage, I think the immediate thought that comes to people's mind is, turnovers, points the other side. Turnovers can be just throwing the ball out of bounds, where the ball then gets inbounded and the offense gets set. It doesn't always necessarily lead into points off of turnovers, fast break, etc. But Air Force turns, they don't get their full amount of possessions because they turn it over a bunch. they don't offensive rebound. We just talked about Princeton and Vermont don't offensive rebound. No second chances, slow team, turn over half their possessions, don't shoot it all that great other than from three, which Wyoming defends well, don't shoot free throws well, et cetera, et cetera. Wyoming, and I'll say one more thing that kind of plays towards Wyoming here, Adam. And in the end, when I sum this up, I'll let people know that there's a couple ways to look at this. But Air Force offensively goes slow. Defensively, they allow shots very, very quickly. And Wyoming would prefer that. Wyoming's more of a quick-paced team. But they play defense that's more than good enough to swallow Air Force on the offensive end. And I just don't know that this game's going to be played at breakneck, where in order to get to 145, where this game is lined, you kind of have to get to, I don't know, 82, even that's too high, right? 78, 66, 79, 66. I don't know that Air Force gets to 66. I don't know that Wyoming gets to 79 here. I think the 145 is too high. It opened 146. And it's been bet down a little bit since, and it's going even further, guys. So again, we talk about shopping. Find the 145s. Don't settle for the 144.5, although I still think it's good there. But it's an early game. Mostly a fade of the Air Force offense here to play under the total. If you're looking at team totals, you could look toward Air Force under 66.5 if you wanted here. But I want to incorporate the whole game. So for me, parlay leg, client play to our donor there is going to be Wyoming Air Force. Early start, guys, 4 o'clock East, 1 o'clock Pacific, under 145.
So a couple things it's going to support your argument for the under here. I've been to this game before. Air Force, for whatever reason, they play the last couple of years, they've played their Mountain West home opener early, like during the day. I got out there a couple of years ago and saw part of the reason I went out. I literally I flew into Denver for a day, didn't even get a hotel. Like I flew into Denver for a day to go to 2 games and then fly home. And the reason was they had like 14-1 Utah State coming in, and then I was able to go see Colorado State, New Mexico at night, and it was just like it worked out. There was like no one there for like a Utah State team that I think was ranked at the time. Point is, there'll be no atmosphere for this game. It's going to be an early start. Clune Arena will be half full, if that. Wyoming, I think, feeds off of that the altitude and playing at home. I think that drives some of their offense. So you don't get that on the road here. Yes, Colorado Springs still the altitude, but I'm saying for what Wyoming, I feel like they're definitely worse when you take them out of Laramie. And the offense would suffer. And then the biggest thing here for me that puts me on your side, Rob, is I just don't think people understand. Like Air Force was awful last year, but like Ethan Taylor individually was one of the better players in the conference. Like Ethan Taylor single-handedly would just bail that offense out. Like they would run a possession that would do nothing, and he would have like 30 points or 28 points on contested jumpers, like where he was just like, oh, there's 5 seconds in the shot clock. No one's going to do anything. Let me just cook, and I'm going to go hit a mid-range or hit a 3, and would single-handedly keep Air Force from not being like the worst team in the country. This year, no Ethan Taylor. This year, 351st nationally, 65.5 points per game. They get absolutely nothing easy. Nothing easy. They never get to the foul line. Like you just won't see Air Force get like a putback, right? Like they get no rebounds. They never get to the foul line. They get nothing easy. Like where does enough offense come from? Like Wyoming's a 12.5 point favorite here. So essentially you need just a home run road effort from Wyoming to probably put this over, right? Because that number suggests that Wyoming's going to do the majority of the scoring. I just don't trust. I mean, I like Sundance and Wicks as much as the next guy, right? Like I like what they're doing in Wyoming. I don't trust this team to go on the road in a sleepy environment in an early tip and just drop 90 or 80 plus, whatever they're going to need. Rob, you're so good at like kind of having like the score in your head. Like, what do you think Wyoming needs here to put this over? Because you're not getting it from Air Force,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
they need 80. They need 80. right? They need 80 to get to 146. As simple as that. And that makes it a Wyoming cover, 80 to 66. 79 to 66 is what it takes to land right on the number and still cover if you have Wyoming. But 79 to 66, I mean, I could see Air Force scoring 61. 62, which means Wyoming has to go into the mid 80s, which just seems like a lot. And real quick here, Adam, just while we're talking about it, you had mentioned earlier that you're going to find a lot of these teams that haven't played any true road games yet, or a minimal amount of true road games. Wyoming's only been on the road twice. Sam Houston's a much better team than Air Force, but Wyoming only scored 70 in that venue, 78 to 70. And then they go on the road to Texas Tech, which is an extremely good opponent. That game only gets to 148 with Texas Tech's offense. So again, this Air Force team it's as much of a fade on the Air Force offense and probably the matchup, the Wyoming defense against the Air Force offense, and then Wyoming just not caring after, another thing, they haven't played in 10 days. Could it be rusty, this shooting for Wyoming? So that's going to be our parlay leg, at least on my end, will be the Wyoming Air Force early start under 145.
Yeah, and listen, Rob, for Air Force to beat a team like Wyoming, which is I still think it's a stretch to say they're a quality team inside the confines of this conference. Like Wyoming is definitely not a bad basketball team, but like when I think quality Mountain West teams, I think like teams like Boise State, Utah State, New Mexico, right? Like that. I don't think Wyoming, like they're still a middling team in this league. They are going to need to slow the game down considerably. And Scott will do that. Like he wants to play snail's pace because he knows his path to victory in a game like this is to have as few possessions as possible. So he's going to try to take the air out of the ball. There's going to be very little juice, if any, in the arena. And I mean, Wyoming, again, like Laramie's not far from Colorado State, but it's like, or from Colorado Springs, I don't think. Or maybe it is kind of far. I think it's closer to Fort Collins. So, but even if it wasn't, Wyoming fans don't really travel like that for basketball. So like, I kind of see just like an ugly game. I'll be shocked if Wyoming scores more than 80 points in this game. And if you're saying they need to get 80 plus to put this over, I think we've done the math here. I feel like you've got an under right there. All right, listen, as this is always going to be, there's going to be so much more on the slate that we don't get to on the show. The point of this show is to come and share some info on some of the games you ask about. We have a feature game. We're going to give out a best bet. A lot of times it's a client play. We have put together a package that should be up by about lunchtime today. That's going to be myself and Rob. It's all of our plays in college basketball. You get full analysis. I mean, I'm writing extensively on the games I put out. So if you like the show and you like the info that we're giving you, there's so much more of that on the website. And now that they're going to put this package up on a daily basis, 3 days, it is going to take the cost per play down considerably. You get 5% plays every play. College hoop, it's going to be a great deal. So if you like the info and we didn't hit a game that you were looking for, go check out that package and give it a shot. I think you will be impressed at how much more info that's wasn't given out on the show is actually in a 3-day package. As far as today is concerned, $5. It's $5 Tuesday. Rob Vino's got a totals play up, and I have my first college basketball 5%er of the season. It's a spot that I love. Love it so much that even though it's Tuesday and I've got to sell it up against people selling plays for $5, I said, you know what? It's still got to be a 5%er because that's how good this spot is. So that's up on the site. But again, if you go for the combo package, myself and Rob, which should be up at some point today, you're going to get that and you're going to get Rob's play as well. So check those out. Hopefully, again, you took something away from the show. And at worst, for the crowd that's just like, give me the picks. We don't want to hear you ramble. We just want the picks. We've got 2 of them. It's a 2-team parlay. I priced one of these at -120. So we're going to call it, it's plus 250, but shop around. I'm going to take Seattle -5. That's probably the one that you're going to have to put the -120 on because most books have -5.5. So Seattle -5. And Rob is going with Wyoming Air Force under 145. That's a day game. Seattle's the degenerate special, so hopefully some entertainment throughout the course of the day. Rob gets the total home, and then we're on the Red Hawks tonight to hit a show parlay. Rob, show parlays plus 3.66 units on the season. They are alive and well ever since we went to the two-teamer. So let's get these home. We'll be back to celebrate New Year's Eve with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern. More Full Court Press. We'll see you guys then.